with the views,
So it is
and we like to thank everybody for all the love that we got on the other videos that we did. Thank you for chiming in, with your comments, your suggestions on the series that we're doing.
Thank you so much for all the birthday wishes.
Thank you.
I am trying my best to celebrate.
Help me, please. The dispatcher leaned closer to her headset, straining to hear the faint voice that broke through the static. A woman's desperation echoed in the background of a calm male voice insisting, "I didn't call." But the woman didn't stop. Her pleas carried urgency, fear, a cry from deep within. Seconds later, the line went dead. By the time police arrived at the quiet house in Spring Creek Estates, the neighborhood was cloaked in silence. Inside, two bodies lay on the floor. Teresa Adams Pugh, a 4-year-old grandmother and beloved fashion vlogger, and her husband of 20 years, Christopher Pugh, a respected home builder and community mentor. They had looked like the perfect couple family celebrations, church gatherings, business success, and smiles that painted social media like a love story. But behind closed doors, something had cracked. That haunting 911 call was the only glimpse of the truth before it all came undone. Tonight, we rewind the story not just to remember how it ended, but to ask, how could a marriage built over 2 decades, filled with children, grandchildren, and dreams, collapse in such a final storm of silence and gunfire? The call came at 11:43 p.m. on the 22nd of March 2025. It was brief, confusing, and deeply unsettling. A dispatcher in Johnston County, North Carolina, saw the number appear on her screen, answered, and then silence. The caller had hung up. She dialed back. On the other end, a man picked up. He was composed, calm, almost dismissive. "I didn't call," he said. His name was Christopher Pugh, 53 years old, a licensed contractor, known in the community as a teacher, a builder, a man who gave others opportunity. But the dispatcher's trained ear caught something more. In the background, faint but undeniable, a woman's voice trembled. She wasn't calm. She wasn't composed. She was begging for help. That voice belonged to Teresa Adams Pugh, Christopher's wife of 2 decades, a woman who spent her days working, raising a large family, and sharing her love for fashion and beauty online. For a few agonizing minutes, the dispatcher listened as Christopher denied making the call, while Teresa's voice rose in desperation behind him. Then the line went dead. Moments later, the quiet neighborhood of Spring Creek Estates shattered with the sound of gunfire. Officers rushed to the scene but were held back by the law. They needed a warrant, so they waited outside for hours, red and blue lights flooding the sleeping cul-de-sac, while inside, 2 lives slipped away forever. But before that tragic night, before the 911 call that still haunts everyone who's heard it, Teresa was a woman of laughter and resilience. Born in Moore County, North Carolina, in 1970, she grew up in a close-knit family, the kind of daughter who was fun-loving, full of energy, and destined to stand out. She went on to graduate from Fuquay-Varina High School, later attending Wake Technical Community College. She built a career at ARS, then UPS, but her true passion was creativity. On YouTube, under the name Teresa Renee P., she shared fashion tips, hairstyles, beauty routines, and slices of family life. Her videos weren't just tutorials, they were conversations. Viewers adored her warmth, her humor, the way she lit up the screen with authenticity. She'd show off an old quilted jacket from Target, laugh about grocery prices at Aldi, and let her followers peek into the everyday joy of her world. She was the kind of creator people trusted, not because she was polished, but because she was real. Offline, she was the heart of her family. She raised 4 children, celebrated 14 grandchildren, and made her home a gathering place where every Thanksgiving, laughter and dancing filled the rooms. Her mother described her as the life of every family party, decorating for Christmas with an energy that made the holiday feel magical. Teresa's love wasn't quiet, it was vibrant, the kind that left an imprint on everyone around her. By her side was Christopher. To friends and neighbors, they looked unshakable. Christopher wasn't just successful, he was admired. A contractor who built custom homes, He had turned his expertise into a business, CB Pugh Enterprises, and launched a training academy to teach others the trade. He was photographed at seminars, quoted on affordable housing solutions, praised by students who said his program changed their lives. On social media, he spoke with confidence, offering insights into construction and mentorship. Together, Christopher and Teresa appeared to embody the American dream: a stable marriage, a thriving family, a shared life full of faith and achievement. Neighbors saw them hosting large gatherings, their street lined with cars. Family saw them laughing at cookouts, doting on grandchildren, embracing at church events. From the outside, there were no visible cracks, no fights in public, no raised voices, no police reports, no warning signs of what was to come. But Teresa's videos tell a slightly different story. Subtle hints most missed until it was too late. She spoke, more than once, of life's challenges. She admitted to struggles with anxiety and depression, battles with pressure and stress. Sometimes, she wondered aloud whether life would be easier if she wasn't here. She always clarified she wasn't suicidal, but her words carried weight, whispers of a deeper burden. Around her, viewers saw smiles, makeup, and fashion. But beneath, she carried silence. In December 2024, just 3 months before her death, Teresa filmed with Christopher sitting beside her. She tried to coax him into conversation, nudging him gently. "Why you not saying anything? You used to talk so much." But he sat quietly, smiling faintly, answering with one-word replies. His silence now feels heavy, ominous. At the time, it was brushed aside. Later, it seemed like a sign no one wanted to believe. By early 2025, Christopher stopped appearing in her videos altogether. The man who had once been her partner on camera was gone, leaving Teresa to record alone. She spoke of spring fashion trends, of errands at Dollar Tree, of hairstyles and family updates. But her energy had shifted. The light that once radiated so easily now flickered, dimmed, and retreated into routine. Behind their doors, something was happening, something that would never be fully explained. Christopher's business faced pressure, rising costs, labor shortages, the stress of running an academy in uncertain times weighed on him. Students noticed changes: a shorter temper, less patience, a distracted demeanor. Teresa, meanwhile, spoke less of joy and more of going through a lot. Neither offered details. Neither asked for help. Then came March 22nd, a quiet Saturday night in Spring Creek Estates. Neighbors heard nothing unusual until the flashing lights arrived. They didn't know that, just before midnight, a woman inside had begged for her life, while her husband calmly told dispatchers he hadn't called. They didn't know that, in those minutes, decades of marriage would collapse into a final act of violence. The next morning, the headline shocked everyone. Respected builder kills wife of 20 years in murder-suicide. But behind the headline are questions that may never be answered. What drove Christopher to pull the trigger? Why did Teresa, so vibrant and so loved, end her life begging for help while trapped beside the man she'd trusted for 2 decades? And could anyone have seen the signs sooner, or were they hidden too well beneath smiles and success? The following morning, when the sun rose over Spring Creek Estates, the quiet cul-de-sac was draped in yellow tape. The Pugh home, once a place of holiday lights and family laughter, was now a crime scene. Neighbors whispered in disbelief, staring at the house where police cars idled, where investigators walked in and out with cameras and evidence bags. Some had been woken in the night by the sound of gunshots, others by the sight of flashing red and blue lights, but none imagined what had really happened behind those walls. To them, Christopher and Teresa had always looked like the couple who had it all: faith, family, stability. The truth was harder to face. The man who had built homes for others had destroyed his own. When investigators pieced together the timeline, the details chilled them. The 911 call, at 11:43 p.m., Teresa's muffled cries for help in the background of Christopher's calm denial. The gunshots that followed minutes later. The hours that officers spent waiting outside because the law required a warrant before entry. By the time they finally went inside, both Christopher and Teresa were dead. Murder-suicide. No note, no explanation, no second chance. For her family, the news felt impossible. Teresa had been the glue, the one who organized gatherings, who made every Thanksgiving a celebration, who decorated for Christmas as if joy itself depended on her lights and ornaments. She was a grandmother of 14, a mother of 4, and a mentor to countless women who followed her on YouTube. Just weeks before, she had been posting outfits, talking about hairstyles, smiling through the screen, and now she was gone. Taken not by illness, not by accident, but by the man she had called her husband for more than 2 decades. Her granddaughter Da later said through tears, "My pawpaw never yelled at us. You can't even say you saw him mad. They didn't fuss in front of us." To the younger generation, their marriage had seemed unshakable. Love, respect, unity, that was what they thought they saw. But silence, it turns out, can hide far more than arguments ever could. And silence was something Teresa herself had been carrying. In one of her later videos, filmed just months before her death, she admitted to her viewers that she'd been battling depression and anxiety. She confessed she sometimes thought about whether life would be easier if she wasn't here. Not that she would act on those thoughts, but that the weight she carried often felt unbearable. Her words, spoken so casually into the camera, are heartbreaking now. They were hints, breadcrumbs scattered for anyone willing to notice, but her audience scrolled past, leaving cheerful comments about her jacket, her hairstyle, her smile. No one imagined those quiet admissions would become echoes after she was gone. Christopher's world, too, was under strain. His construction academy, once a beacon of hope for students and veterans seeking new careers, was being tested by the same pressures every builder faced. Rising costs, labor shortages, a volatile housing market. His social media posts about affordable housing grew sharper, more urgent. Some students noticed his mood shifting. He seemed shorter-tempered, less patient, distracted. To outsiders, he was still the respected mentor, the community builder. But cracks had begun to show. Hidden beneath the persona of success, what happened between them in those final hours will never be fully known. Did they argue? Did Teresa beg him to listen, to stop, as she had begged on that call? Or was the silence that had grown between them over the years finally too heavy to bear? Investigators found no financial crisis, no history of abuse, no evidence of an affair. They found no note from Christopher, no final words to explain why. That absence is what haunts the most. How does a marriage of 20 years, a life built together, end in such violence without leaving a single trace of warning? Friends looked back at old messages. "Pray for us." Teresa had written to one church member, "Going through some things," she admitted to another. But she never gave details, never said she was in danger. Was it pride? Was it hope that things would get better? Or was it fear of what might happen if she spoke too loudly about what was happening inside her own home? Her December video, with Christopher sitting silently beside her, now feels like a frozen clue. She smiled, teased him for being quiet, tried to draw him out, but he said little, just nodding. His words cut short. Watching it now, viewers say his silence feels heavy, almost menacing. At the time, it was just another upload, a slice of daily life. Now, it plays like a warning no one could hear. On March 22nd, as neighbors tucked their children into bed, Teresa stood in her own living room facing the unimaginable. She reached for her phone, dialed 911, and pleaded for help. The dispatcher heard her voice. She was alive then, fighting for survival. Minutes later, everything went silent. And that silence still lingers, because behind the smiles of social media, behind the parties and church gatherings, behind the image of success and stability, the truth remained hidden. Teresa's fashion videos are still online. Comments continue to appear. "You inspired me. Rest in peace, beautiful soul." But for those who loved her, who knew her, the question will never fade. How did the woman who taught others to embrace life so fully lose her own to the hands of the man who once vowed to protect her? There's more to uncover in this case, more moments, more hidden truths that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love and safety. If you want to hear the rest of Teresa's story, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. The weeks that followed the tragedy felt unreal for Teresa's family. One moment she was posting videos about spring outfits and hairstyles. The next, she was gone. Her life ended in the very home where she had built so many memories. Her mother, Marion Shaw, was the one who voiced what everyone in the family was feeling. She made every holiday brighter. Now, the woman who decorated Christmas trees like her happiness depended on, it would never string another light. For her grandchildren, the loss was unbearable. Da, who had always seen her grandmother as a force of love and encouragement, described how much Teresa pushed them to succeed, how she demanded they strive for the best. Her granddaughter Daniela had just been accepted to North Carolina A&T University, and Teresa couldn't stop talking about it. Now, Daniela would be walking across the stage without her grandmother in the audience, without the woman who had cheered her on through every milestone. The shock wasn't confined to family. The entire community of Spring Creek Estates was stunned. To neighbors, the Pughs had been a model couple. Their home had been a hub of celebration, with parties so large that cars lined the streets. Laughter, music, grandchildren running across the lawn, this was the image everyone held of them. When news broke that Christopher had killed Teresa, and then himself, the disbelief was absolute. Neighbors insisted there were no signs, no yelling, no fights, not even the knowledge that a gun existed in the home. He adored her, Marion repeated. Whatever Renee wanted, Chris would give her. But now, that adoration seemed twisted, redefined by his final act of violence. Investigators combed through every detail of their lives, desperate for answers. They searched phones, computers, financial records, social media accounts, anywhere that might reveal the reason for what had happened. They found nothing. No mounting debt, no evidence of substance abuse, no record of domestic violence, not even a suicide note left behind. The Pugh home contained only absence, an unanswered why. Christopher's business showed the usual strain of the construction industry but was still operational. He posted about housing shortages and rising costs, but nothing suggested collapse. His academy was still teaching students across North Carolina, and many described him as a mentor who had changed their lives. Yet others noticed subtle differences in him in recent months: a shorter temper, less patience, an edge that hadn't been there before. Was it stress? Was it something more? They couldn't be sure, and now it was too late to ask. What investigators couldn't find in records, Teresa's videos hinted at in fragments. Her vlogs had become less frequent. Where once she posted weekly, now there were gaps stretching into months. Her responses to viewers grew shorter, less lively. She still smiled for the camera, still talked about clothes and hairstyles, but something in her eyes had dimmed. In one video, she mentioned going through depression and anxiety, her voice softer, more vulnerable. She admitted sometimes wondering whether life would be easier if she weren't here, not in a way that suggested she would act on it, but enough to show she was burdened. Those who re-watched the video after her death saw it differently. What once felt like casual openness now seemed like a red flag waving silently in the wind. The December video with Christopher, where she teased him for his silence, became one of the most haunting pieces of evidence. At the time, it looked like ordinary married banter. Looking back, it felt chilling. She pressed him. "Why you not saying anything? You used to talk so much." He only smiled, muttered short replies. His silence seemed to carry weight, the kind that builds like a storm no one sees coming until it breaks. The night of March 22nd was when that storm finally broke. Teresa's last words, barely audible over the phone line, were pleas for help. She called 911. She tried. But help did not come fast enough. Officers stood outside, bound by protocol, while her life slipped away inside. And in those long hours of waiting, the chance to save her vanished forever. For those left behind, the haunting part is not just the brutality of her death, but the invisibility of the signs. How could a couple married for 20 years, with 4 children and 14 grandchildren, with careers, faith, and community respect, end like this without anyone knowing something was wrong? What were the clues? Were they in her mentions of life's challenges on camera? Were they in his silence beside her? Were they in the whispered, "Pray for us" messages she sent to church friends? Or was the tragedy proof that sometimes, no matter how closely we look, the cracks stay hidden until they swallow everything whole? These are the questions that haunt her family, her friends, and her audience still. And perhaps the most painful truth is this: sometimes the most dangerous silence is the one that looks like peace. By April, less than a month after Teresa's death, her YouTube channel became something entirely different from what she had built it to be. Once a place for hair tutorials, budget fashion finds, and slices of family life, it had turned into a digital memorial. The comment sections filled with sorrow. Viewers who once asked about lipstick shades now typed messages like, "Rest in peace, beautiful soul, and you inspired me more than you'll ever know." Every video, from her cheerful shopping hauls to the one where she teased her husband for being too quiet, became rewatched and replayed not as lifestyle content, but as clues. Clues people desperately searched for in hindsight, asking themselves if they had missed the signs. Her family, though, didn't need to look back at videos to feel the void. They lived it every day. Her sister admitted she hadn't been the same since Teresa left, that not a single day passed without thinking about her. On June 29th, what should have been Teresa's 55th birthday, her family gathered at Carolina Biblical Gardens. They sang happy birthday, not in a dining room decorated with balloons and cake, but at her graveside. They wore her favorite colors, played her music, and tried to celebrate the woman she had been. But in their voices there was a catch: the sharp edge of grief that makes joy feel impossible. Her granddaughter Daniela, who graduated later that summer, dedicated her college degree to both grandparents. Standing in her cap and gown, she carried Teresa's memory like a flame, refusing to let the tragedy steal the pride her grandmother had always instilled in her. "She wanted us to be our best," Daniela said. "This is for her." For the family, moments like that were both healing and unbearable. Teresa should have been there. Christopher should not have stolen that future. Outside of family, the community struggled to make sense of what had happened. Some pointed to Christopher's business pressures, the visible shift in his demeanor as he juggled teaching, construction, and leadership. Others wondered if Teresa's confessions about anxiety and depression hinted at deeper struggles inside the marriage. Yet the truth was simpler and more devastating. No one knew. No one suspected. No one imagined that the man they saw mentoring students and building homes would one night turn a gun on his wife. The sheriff's office confirmed what the evidence already showed. It was a murder-suicide. Christopher had shot Teresa, then himself. The weapon was recovered, the house processed. But when people asked why, investigators had no answer. There was no financial collapse, no addiction, no record of violence. Nothing but silence. And that silence raised questions bigger than the case itself. How often do families, churches, neighbors look at a couple and assume happiness because there's no shouting, no visible chaos? How often do we equate peace with safety, forgetting that silence can smother cries we never hear? Teresa's final pleas into that phone line prove she was fighting for her life. She reached out, but even as she begged, the system waited. For hours, officers remained outside 10 Cheney Drive, bound by the legal requirement of a warrant. Neighbors saw the flashing lights, heard the reports of gunfire, and still believed Teresa might be saved. By the time entry was granted, the house was silent, the outcome irreversible. In the weeks after, anger bubbled beneath grief. Could she have been saved if police had gone in sooner? Could her life have been spared if someone had taken the hints in her videos more seriously? The questions stacked one on top of the other, and none came with answers. What remained were the statistics no one wants to face. Every week in America, 12 women die in murder-suicides. Most never make national headlines. Most are preceded by the same signs: stress, silence, subtle shifts in behavior that are ignored or unseen until it's too late. Teresa became one of those numbers, though to those who loved her, she was so much more. A grandmother, a sister, a daughter, a mentor. A woman whose smile could light up a room. Her family decided to transform their grief into something that might help others. A foundation in Teresa's name was proposed, designed to support women over 50 who want to return to work, just as she had done. It would offer them confidence, skills, and encouragement, keeping alive the message she had lived by. It's never too late to reinvent yourself. And yet, no foundation, no vigil, no birthday memorial could change the truth. Teresa's death was final. Her YouTube channel would never see another upload. Her voice, once so full of warmth, would now only live in recordings. And the man who had once been her partner, her husband of 2 decades, would forever be remembered not for the homes he built, but for the one he destroyed. The tragedy of Teresa and Christopher Pugh leaves us with a truth too heavy to ignore. Success can mask struggle, silence can conceal suffering, and love can live side by side with violence until the night it doesn't. The story of Teresa Adams Pugh is not just about one night of violence. It is about all the quiet years that led up to it. The silence, the hints, the small shifts that no one recognized until it was too late. To understand her tragedy, we must walk back through those years, peeling away the layers of a life that looked so perfect from the outside. Teresa was born on the 29th of June 1970 in Moore County, North Carolina, into a family that remembered her as fun-loving, energetic, and the kind of girl who made ordinary days feel like celebrations. She grew up surrounded by love, graduated from Fuquay-Varina High School, and later attended Wake Technical Community College. For years, she worked in management at ARS, then UPS, providing stability for her family. But she was not someone who lived quietly in the shadows of routine. Teresa always sought to create, to express herself, to share joy in ways that reached beyond her front door. That outlet became YouTube. Under the name Teresa Renee P., she built a channel dedicated to fashion, hairstyles, makeup, and glimpses of family life. Her audience adored her because she wasn't trying to be a celebrity, she was real. She laughed at herself, pointed out bargains from Target or Dollar Tree, and talked candidly about aging, style, and confidence. Viewers didn't just see clothes. They saw a woman inviting them into her world, saying, "You deserve to feel beautiful too." Over time, her channel grew into a small community, one where strangers felt like friends, encouraged by her warmth. But behind the makeup tutorials and shopping hauls, Teresa sometimes let slip fragments of her inner world. She confessed to struggles with anxiety and depression, saying stress sometimes felt unbearable. In one heartbreaking moment, she admitted she had thought about whether life might be easier if she weren't here, not because she intended to harm herself, but because of the weight she carried. She always smiled through it, moved quickly to lighter topics, but those words linger now with painful clarity. At the time, her followers left supportive comments. No one realized how heavy those confessions really were. By her side through much of this was her husband, Christopher Pugh. To everyone else, Christopher seemed to embody success. After attending Livingstone College, he spent over 16 years as a general contractor, eventually launching CB Pugh Enterprises, and later the Pugh Builders Academy. His program promised to transform lives by teaching construction skills to veterans, retirees, and entrepreneurs. He posted proudly on social media about America's housing crisis and how his students could be part of the solution. He was respected, admired, even celebrated as a man who gave back to his community. Together, Christopher and Teresa appeared to live a charmed life. Their marriage lasted over 20 years. Their family included 4 children and 14 grandchildren, and their home in Spring Creek Estates became a hub of gatherings. Neighbors saw cars filling the street for family parties, heard laughter and music spilling from the house, watched grandchildren playing across the lawn. Photos on Facebook showed them smiling, embracing at church events, surrounded by the people they loved. But the cracks, invisible to the outside world, had already begun to form. In a December 2024 video, Teresa filmed herself with Christopher, sitting quietly beside her. She laughed, trying to draw him out. "Why you not saying anything? You used to talk so much." He barely responded, offering short replies, smiling faintly but never engaging. At the time, it seemed like light-hearted banter. In hindsight, the silence felt heavy an omen. By early 2025, Christopher had stopped appearing in her videos entirely. Teresa continued filming alone, her smile intact, but her energy different. Where once she posted weekly, now weeks and months stretched between uploads. Her fashion tips grew shorter, her responses to fans more clipped. She mentioned going through a lot in several uploads, but never elaborated. Her followers didn't press, perhaps not wanting to intrude. Yet those vague admissions were the closest she came to crying out for help. Meanwhile, Christopher's world was also shifting. His business, though still functional, was under pressure. The entire construction industry faced rising costs and labor shortages. Students noticed he was less patient, more irritable, distracted. A man once seen as a mentor began showing cracks in the facade of control. Success demanded that he appear successful, but in private, frustration seemed to be growing. All of this collided on the night of the 22nd of March 2025. The day had been ordinary in Spring Creek Estates. Neighbors tended yards. Children played. The street was quiet by evening. At 11:43 p.m., a 911 call came through from the Pugh home at 10 Cheney Drive. The call was short, disconnected almost immediately. The dispatcher dialed back. Christopher answered, calm, controlled, denying he had called. But in the background, faint and terrified, Teresa's voice could be heard. She was begging for help. For minutes, the dispatcher listened to the contradiction. A man insisting nothing was wrong, and a woman whose voice betrayed the truth. Then the line went dead. Moments later, neighbors heard gunshots. Police arrived quickly but were stopped by the law. Even with shots fired and a woman's cry for help recorded, they could not enter without a warrant. So they waited. For hours, tactical units surrounded the home. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, horrified but powerless. By the time officers entered nearly 12 hours later, the house was silent. Teresa and Christopher were both dead. Murder-suicide. The shock spread like wildfire. Family members received calls they never imagined. Teresa's mother, Marion, said the words felt impossible. Her daughter, the heartbeat of every gathering, was gone. Her grandchildren struggled to understand how their gentle, loving pawpaw could have done something so monstrous. Neighbors were stunned. There had been no shouting, no signs of danger, no inkling that violence was possible. Some didn't even know Christopher owned a gun. Investigators searched for answers, but there were none. No note left behind, no secret affair, no evidence of substance abuse, no financial collapse. Christopher's academy faced pressures, but it was not failing. Teresa had spoken of stress, but nothing to suggest she feared her life. The marriage, at least on paper, looked stable until the very moment it ended in bloodshed. In the absence of answers, grief turned to anger. Why did police wait so long outside? Could Teresa have been saved if they had acted sooner? Why hadn't anyone taken her admissions of anxiety more seriously? Why hadn't someone asked what she meant when she said life was throwing things at her? Every question only deepened the wound. The family chose to focus on Teresa's legacy rather than her death. On her 55th birthday, they gathered at her grave, wearing her favorite colors, playing her music, dancing in her memory. Her granddaughter Daniela dedicated her graduation to her. Friends proposed a foundation in her name, supporting women over 50 who wanted to reinvent themselves, just as Teresa had done when she returned to work at UPS and built her YouTube channel. Her family wanted her message to live on. It's never too late to embrace yourself and start again. But grief is not linear. Some days her family smiled at memories of her laugh, her holiday decorations, her insistence that everyone dance at family parties. Other days the rage came back, rage at Christopher, at the silence that hid the cracks, at themselves for not seeing what now seemed so obvious. The truth is that Teresa's story is not isolated. Every week in America, 12 women die in murder-suicides, most at the hands of men they trusted. Access to a firearm increases the risk of lethality by 500%. These aren't crimes of passion. They're crimes of control, moments where stress, silence, and unspoken pain turn deadly. Teresa became another number in a statistic her family never wanted to know. And yet, her name lives on. Her videos still inspire women who stumble upon them. Her smile still lights up rooms, even through a screen. Her family still gathers, still dances, still remembers. But they also carry the burden of questions that will never be answered. What truly pushed Christopher to pull the trigger that night? Was it stress? Shame? Silence? Or something darker? Could Teresa have been saved? Perhaps the hardest truth is this. Teresa's final words were not just pleas for help on a 911 call. They were in her videos, her admissions of struggle, her quiet hints of pain. We didn't hear them loudly enough. And now, the responsibility is ours to listen harder, to see past smiles, to believe that silence itself can be a scream, because once someone becomes a headline, it's already too late. The tragedy of Teresa and Christopher Pugh left an entire community staring into the kind of silence that never fully resolves. By the time investigators closed their files, they had evidence of what happened, but not why, and in many ways, that absence is the hardest part for those left behind. For Teresa's family, there is no explanation that makes sense of how a woman who gave so much love could be taken in such a brutal way by the man who once promised to protect her. In the months after, her YouTube channel continued to live online, like a time capsule. Videos of her trying on outfits, laughing about Aldi's prices, or twirling in a jacket became sacred relics. Strangers who never met her typed words of sorrow. "You gave me confidence when I had none. Thank you for showing that beauty has no age. Rest in peace, Queen." To them, she was not just a vlogger but a mentor, someone who taught them that style wasn't vanity but self-expression, that joy could be found in simple things. For her children and grandchildren, her absence was far more raw. They felt it at graduations, at birthdays, at Sunday dinners. Every milestone was shadowed by the thought, "She should be here." Daniela's graduation speech, dedicated to her grandparents, brought an entire room to tears. She spoke of her grandmother's insistence on education, on striving for excellence, and how she carried that spirit across the stage with her. But she also admitted, privately, that she looked out into the audience and wished she could see Teresa's smile one more time. The anger at Christopher has not faded. To some, he is a puzzle. How could a man so respected, so accomplished, so seemingly in control, unravel into a murderer? To others, the question isn't how, but why didn't we see it? Why didn't anyone push harder when Teresa said she was going through a lot? Why didn't we read more into Christopher's silence on camera? Why didn't we notice the cracks forming in the facade of their so-called perfect marriage? The questions are endless, but they come too late. Domestic violence experts say this is the cruelest pattern of murder-suicides. They are rarely preceded by explosive arguments or visible warning signs. More often, they simmer in silence, masked by normalcy, hidden by smiles and church photos and family barbecues. Then, one night, everything collapses. Access to a gun makes it final, and those left behind are left with statistics that feel unbearable. 12 women every week in America killed in murder-suicides, most by men they have loved and trusted. Out of the pain, Teresa's family has tried to create light. The foundation proposed in her name to help women over 50 reinvent themselves remains a work of love. It reflects Teresa's own journey. After raising a family, she built a new identity online, proving that it is never too late to chase joy. If even one woman finds strength, confidence, or independence through that foundation, Teresa's legacy will live on in a way her husband's violence could never erase. But healing, her family admits, is not linear. Some days they remember her laugh and find comfort. Other days they wake with fury, unable to forgive Christopher, unable to understand why. Some days they cling to faith, other days they feel nothing but emptiness. This is the weight of murder-suicide, not just a life ended, but a family fractured, left to carry grief and rage together. For the community of Spring Creek Estates, the sight of that house with its police tape is something they will never forget. Neighbors still drive past 10 Cheney Drive and shake their heads. Some avoid looking altogether. It is a reminder that what looks like peace from the outside can hide storms no one hears until they break. And that, perhaps, is the hardest lesson Teresa's story leaves behind. Success does not mean safety. Smiles can hide suffering. Silence is not always peace. When someone says, "I'm going through a lot," we cannot dismiss it. When someone withdraws, becomes quieter, less present, we must ask why. When someone insists everything is fine, we must remember that sometimes silence itself is the loudest scream. Teresa's life mattered. She was more than the way she died. She was a mother, a grandmother, a sister, a mentor, and a woman who believed that style was joy, and joy was meant to be shared. Her videos still ripple through the internet, inspiring women she never met. Her family still gathers in her memory, determined not to let her name fade into statistics. But the final truth is a haunting one. Teresa's story is both unique and painfully common. Unique in the details of her life, her laughter, her creativity, common in the pattern of silence, control, and sudden violence that claims women's lives every week. And so we are left with a question that does not let go. How many more Teresas will there be before we truly listen, before we take silence seriously, before we treat hidden struggles as the cries for help they are? Because once a voice like Teresa's is silenced, all we can do is replay the videos, read the comments, and wish we had listened more closely while she was still here. Her smile remains, her light remains. The responsibility to learn from her story that remains with us.